The gate camera buzzed twice before I even set down my coffee. 3 figures on the screen, dragging suitcases up my private drive like they owned the tide itself. My mother's cardigan. My father's stiff shoulders. And behind them, the man who broke my nose in a kitchen 9 years ago and never once called to say he was sorry. "We're moving in," my mother said into the intercom, bright as a doorbell salesman. Like 9 years of silence was a weather delay. Like the blood dried on my collar that night had simply evaporated. My name is Everly Rourke. I'm 34. And I've spent almost a decade rebuilding a life out of the wreckage they left behind, wondering if forgiveness was something you owed people just because they shared your last name. I watched my brother's jaw tighten on the screen, that same jaw that had cracked into my cheekbone the night his wife called me trash and he decided I deserved it. I didn't buzz them in. I walked to the gate myself, smiled the way you smile at strangers, and turned the lock until it clicked. Then I watched my father's face fall. Through the bars, my father's voice cracked first. "Everly, open the gate." We drove 6 hours. As if the drive was the hardship. As if distance could compare to what I'd carried. I remembered another gate. The screen door of our childhood kitchen, swinging shut behind me as I ran, blood sheeting down my chin, my mother's voice trailing after my brother instead of after me. "He didn't mean it, sweetheart. You provoked him." 9 years old, that excuse. It hadn't aged since. My brother, Callum, stood silent now, arms crossed, refusing to look at the house. Refusing to look at me. His wife wasn't with him this time. The woman whose one sentence had cost me a broken nose and a decade of holidays spent alone. "We have nowhere else to go," my mother tried again, softer, the tone she used when guilt needed convincing. I almost laughed. Nowhere else, as if I hadn't spent 9 years learning what that word meant. As if I hadn't built this house brick by brick out of nights I cried myself sober. "You have somewhere," I said calmly. "You just didn't think I'd remember the way there." My mother's face went pale. Behind her, Callum finally looked up. "What is that supposed to mean?" Callum's voice hadn't changed. Still that low, warning register he used right before his fists did the talking. I didn't flinch. "Not anymore." "It means," I said, "you have a house. The one Dad co-signed for you and Marissa. 4 bedrooms, ocean view, paid off 2 years early, with the money I lent you when the bank said no." I let that sit in the salt air between us. Or did you forget where that came from? My mother's hand found my father's sleeve, gripping it the way she used to grip mine before pulling me back from Callum's temper, telling me to just apologize, just make it easy for everyone. "That money was a gift," my father said stiffly, rewriting history in real time, the way he always had. "It was a loan," I said. "I have the paperwork. I have everything, actually. Every text, every apology I never got, every Christmas you didn't invite me to." My voice stayed level, but something old and tired cracked open in my chest. I kept records, Dad. Because some part of me always knew this day would come. Callum's jaw tightened. "You're bluffing," he said. I smiled. "Ask Marissa." His face changed. Something shifted in Callum's expression, the particular stillness of a man realizing the ground had moved beneath him without his permission. "Ask Marissa what?" he said, but his voice had lost its edge. I could have let it go. Could have turned around, walked back into my house, and left them standing there with their suitcases and their assumptions. But 9 years of silence deserved an answer. "Ask her why the loan paperwork has her signature on it too," I said. "Ask her why she called me 8 months ago, crying. Asking if I'd help refinance because you'd missed payments on the business line, the one you never told her came from me in the first place." My mother's mouth opened, then closed. "You're lying," Callum said, but his hands had uncurled from fists into something looser. "Something afraid." "I have the voicemail," I said quietly. She said, and I'm quoting her exactly, "I never should have said what I said. I didn't know what he'd do after." Silence. Real silence, the kind that has weight. My father looked at Callum like he was seeing him for the first time in years. "She knew," I said. "About the punch. She's known the whole time." Callum said nothing. My mother started to cry. My mother's crying had always been a weapon before, tears deployed like a curtain call, ending arguments before they finished. But this time no one moved to comfort her. Not even my father. "You're saying Marissa knew he hit you," my father said slowly, like the words tasted wrong in his mouth, "and she still let us believe you attacked him first." I didn't answer right away. I let him sit in it. The version of events he'd carried for 9 years, the one where I was the difficult daughter, the dramatic one, the one who couldn't just let things go. She told everyone I swung first, I said. You believed her over the actual scar on my face. Callum's composure finally cracked. I never meant. You meant it enough to not call for 9 years, I said. You meant it enough to let Mom and Dad skip my 30th birthday because you couldn't be in the same room as me. The wind pulled at my mother's cardigan. Nobody spoke. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text, timed like fate, had a sense of humor. Marissa, he can't know I told you about the house. Please. I looked up at Callum. Too late, I said. I turned my phone around and let him read it himself. Watched his eyes move across the screen, watched 9 years of carefully maintained silence collapse in real time. She's been talking to you, he said. Not a question. An accusation, like I'd stolen something from him, as if loyalty was his to keep, even from the sister he'd broken. She reached out, I corrected. Because she's tired of covering for you. The missed payments. The temper. The story she's told your parents for almost a decade to keep the peace. I paused. Sound familiar? My father's face had gone the color of old paper. Everly, if any of this is true. It's all true, I said. I have bank statements. I have a voicemail. I have the photo the ER took of my face that night, time-stamped, dated, sitting in a folder I never wanted to open again. My mother reached for Callum's arm, an old reflex, protective. He shrugged her off. For the first time in my memory, he looked at her like he didn't recognize the comfort she was offering. Why didn't you show us sooner? My father asked, voice breaking. Because you never asked, I said. You just believed. The gate stayed locked. My father sank onto the low stone wall beside my driveway, suddenly looking every one of his 71 years. My mother stood frozen, her suitcase handle still gripped in one white-knuckled hand, as if letting go might make this moment more real than it already was. Callum stared at the ocean behind my house instead of at me. Easier, maybe, to face the water than his own reflection. I want to see the photo, my father said quietly. I hesitated, not from cruelty, but because some part of me had protected that image for 9 years, kept it folded away like evidence I hoped I'd never need. I unlocked my phone, opened the folder, and held it up to the bars of the gate. My mother made a sound I'd never heard her make before. Not a sob. Something older. Something like recognition, arriving 9 years too late. That's not what I remember, she whispered. You never asked what to remember, I said. You just picked the story that let you keep loving him without complications. Callum finally turned. His eyes were wet, but I felt nothing soften in my chest. Not yet, maybe not ever the way it used to. I'm sorry, he said. First time in 9 years. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't unlock this gate. I didn't slam the door on them. I didn't scream, didn't demand apologies rehearsed for cameras. I simply told them the truth, standing at my own gate, on land I'd bought with money earned far from their approval. You can stay at Callum's house, I said. The one I paid for. Ask Marissa to make up the guest room. She's better at hospitality than either of you gave her credit for. My mother opened her mouth, but nothing came out. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't sound like the same excuses, worn thin from years of use. I watched them walk back down the driveway, suitcases dragging against gravel, 3 people carrying 9 years of silence they'd finally have to unpack themselves. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt lighter, the way you feel when you set down something heavy you didn't realize you'd been carrying so long it had become part of your spine. That night, I sat on my deck and watched the tide erase the footprints they'd left in the sand below my house. Slow, patient, complete. Some doors don't need slamming. They just need to stay locked long enough for people to finally hear the click.